Hello, everyone. And so this is a news worth reporting. And so I saw this article and I read it to its entirety. And I was like, wow. I was like floored because in some ways I wasn't too surprised, but then there was some evil that I felt from hearing that there are people that are still alive today that they know that they had like great grandparents or maybe a great uncle or a family member, or they had wealth passed down to them that was directly tied to slave holding and slave owners that were in their family, and that they hid this, and it went on even after it wasn't supposed to happen anymore. And let me just go on with this. America's final slave ship may provide a case for reparations. Now, a lot of people were saying that they didn't think that this should be an issue anymore, that since we had a president that was black, Obama, that we shouldn't be talking about this. That came from a political figure who, Mitch McConnell is to be exact, made those exact words, that since we have Obama, or we had Obama, we should not be even revisiting this. And then there's been other people who have been skeptical about it, and there's been people who have been coming to the table trying to provide other avenues where reparations could be sparsed. Who would be the ones to receive reparations? But I'm going to get into this article. There are many other articles that are very similar to this one. So America's final slave ship may provide a case for reparations. And so, see, you hear, you have it. Mobile, Alabama. Alabama's steamship proprietor Timothy Meaher financed a final slave vessel that introduced African captives to the U.S., and he got here out of the civil warfare, a rich man. So his descendants with land price thousands and thousands are nonetheless a part of the Cellular Society's higher crust. So the folks whom Meaher enslaved nevertheless emerged from the warfare with freedom, however little else. Census kinds that documented Meaher's post-war riches, listing them as laborers, housewives, farmers, and nothing of worth. Lots of their descendants at this time maintained working class jobs. Now, the historical past of Meaher and the slave ship called the Clotilda could provide one of the many extra clear-cut instances for slavery reparations with identifiable perpetrators and victims. So whereas no formal push for reparations has begun, the topic has been effervescent up quietly amongst group members since early this year, when consultants mentioned they discovered the wreckage of the Clotilda and muddied the waters close to the Cellular. Some say, too, a few years have handed for reparations. Others say the invention of the slave ships, or the ship makes the timing good. So many Clotilda descendants say reconciliation with Meaher would suffice, maybe an opportunity to debate an intertwined historical past. Others hope that the household helps with bold plans to remodel a downtrodden group right into a vacationer attraction. Some need money, some need nothing. Reparation debates normally contain redress for the multitude of descendants from about 4 million black individuals who had been enslaved in the U.S. However, with Congress contemplating whether or not to create a reparations research fee, what would possibly be a single occasion of reparations appeared to be within the metropolis that placed this nation's Atlantic slave commerce lastly ended. Pat Frazier, a descendant of Meaher slave James Dennison, isn't positive. However, she's sad in regards to the lack of justice and what many contemplate the deafening silence of the Meaher's household. So I by no means identified them to only come clean with what occurred, mentioned Frazier, who is now 68 years old. But in Cellular, like many Southern communities, descendants of slave homeowners and enslaved persons are typically neighbors, although in vastly, completely different circumstances. Initially, from the Maine, Meaher moved south and acquired wealthy off steamboats and a sawmill. So he bought the schooner Clotilda for a reported $35,000 and financed the slave expedition to West Africa the year earlier than the warfare started. So the worldwide slave commerce was already outlawed. And so this is where I had told you that even after it was outlawed, there were still people who were perpetrating this whole behavior of having slaves and slave ships. And this guy named Timothy Meaher was one of them, who wagered he may import slaves in defiance of the ban. So arrested after the ship carrying about 110 captives arrived was scuttled in Cellular in 1860, and he was cleared of fees by a decide based on Desires of Africa in Alabama. A e-book by Sylvain A. Diouf. So historic accounts say that Meaher refused to offer land after warfare to the freed Africans who had scraped collectively cash to buy property. So they based a group known as the what is called Africa Town, USA. So a lot of people may not be aware of this. Some may be aware of this. But there was what was an Africa Town, USA. The place, a few of the West African methods of the once enslaved folks had been preserved. Its remnants nonetheless exist. Meaher listed property together with 20,000 in land and a private property within 1870 census. So a newspaper article mentioned his son Augustine, who was a multimillionaire in 1905. So the court docket data in 2012 say that the Meaher household actually property firm held 35 million in property together with 22,000 acres of land, timber plus rental earnings and money. So tax data present Meaher's family stayed massive landowners with $20 million in property by means of the company. So certainly one of Timothy Meaher's distant granddaughters was feted because the White Queen of Town's racially segregated Mardi Gras in 2007. 2007, that is. The Black Queen that year was the descendant of one of many Clotilda Africans. So the Cellular Space options Meaher State Park, Meaher Avenue close to Africa Town, and the Meaher household has indicators all through the world providing land for lease. So a pink concrete maker bearing the household's title stands within the Tensas Delta, close to the place where the Clotilda stays had been discovered the final year. So there's no consensus on what reparations would possibly embrace for Clotilda descendants, but Joycelyn Davis, who helped set up the Clotilda Descendants affiliation, mentioned dialogue can be a superb beginning. So if we may simply sit down on the desk and simply discuss, that might be a robust factor, she mentioned. So in experience, a descendant of Clotilda captive Osa Kibi mentioned, persons are due greater than discuss. So he known as the reparations, and wonderful thought. So if not private funds to the Clotilda descendants, they might embrace contributions to some group to assist descendants, maybe to revitalize what is known as Africa Town Parks, the memorial, a Clotilda reproduction, housing, and companies. So I feel it will be equitable for them to make some cost to the descendants of the Clotilda cargo, what is true. So if we're in a primary place to have our court docket system resolve one thing mentioned in experience of Texas. Okay, so Diouf, who has intently studied the Clotilda in Africa Town, mentioned that the Meaher clan inherited generational wealth, whereas Timothy Meaher's captives scraped by. So that is the case for reparations for what today are people who are descendants of this slave ship. So there was nothing, and there was nonetheless nothing, she mentioned. The nationwide African American reparations fee, shaped in 2015, is searching for an apology for slavery plus cash for enterprise growth, well-being, training, historic preservation, housing, legal justice reform, and extras. And so the Meahers aren't saying what, if something they need to do, and have made no public remark in regards to the Clotilda discovery, which these people who are the descendants of the slaveholder Timothy Meaher, and they still exist till this day. They've known about this, of course, so I'm adding that in there. And so that's what I felt was really evil, that people could know this and they're sitting on that information and they refuse to budge. And you hear all of this talk going on, and now you see that they're quiet, knowing they know this is going to come out eventually, which it has. So, and a lawyer representing the household of Augustine Meaher III, distant grandson of Timothy Meaher, declined to remark to the related press. Different relations or their legal professionals didn't return messages, which is not unsurprising. So there are indications that the Meaher household could have identified the placement of the Clotilda much earlier than the researchers had discovered it. In an investigative report launched at the Alabama Historic Fee, quoted historian John Sledge as saying one of the many Meahers instructed him relations twice dynamited the wreckage within the 1950s to retrieve beneficial copper off the hull. So they were still trying to get money off of the ship to get copper, even after the whole thing was done away with, and the records were still there. They even made mention that they tried to destroy it, hide it, that is. So thus, the large quarry that Ted Kibi, in an interview, Sledge declined to say the place he had heard the story, however, actually surprised how the lot of anybody knew he had mentioned. So that's the large quarry to Ted Kibi, one other descendant of the Clotilda captain Osa Kibi, who knew what he needs to know extras in regard to the Meahers and the lives of the folks Timothy Meaher enslaved. So I have no emotions about what occurred. It's part of the historical past, however, I'd love to satisfy them. They're a part of our historical past, he mentioned. So you can learn more about this, but like it said, they twice tried to dynamite the wreckage within the 1950s to retrieve beneficial copper off the hull. Also, I believe they tried to not only just receive the copper off of it, they probably tried to destroy it so that, that maybe people wouldn't even know what was going on, what the whole thing was even about. I would believe. You want to hide something like that because you know that eventually people will find out. And so I guess, how could you destroy such a big ship like that? I mean, unless you had the, professional tools to do so. They certainly are living off the wealth, aren't they? But with that being said, I just thought this was an interesting story. And so there are other articles that are related to this. And so this, like it says, America's final slave ship may provide a case for reparations. And so a lot of people were talking about this. And so I think this was a good article, something that people are probably not full aware of. But it is important to know that these things are just blueprints of what has happened from before and what has shaped America to what it is today. With that being said, thanks for listening.